Thomas Amato clicked through another boring website, his eyes tired from staring at the screen all day. Work at the IT company had been the same as always. Fix this, update that. Now at home, alone in his small apartment, the silence bothered him. The divorce papers had been finalized 3 months ago. He still wasn't used to the emptiness. He opened another beer, his third tonight. The laptop screen glowed in the dark room. Thomas scrolled aimlessly until a colorful thumbnail caught his eye. A young woman with bright eyes smiled at the camera. The title read, "Lisa's Evening Chat, Come Say Hi." Without much thought, he clicked. "Hey everyone. Lisa here. Thanks for joining tonight's stream." Her voice was warm and friendly. Not fake like many others he had seen before. She wore a simple blue top, her brown hair falling around her shoulders. Thomas sat up a little straighter. Lisa talked about her day, laughed at comments from viewers, and played some music. She wasn't like the other streamers who did too much to get attention. She seemed real. Thomas watched until the end of the 2-hour stream without saying anything in the chat. The next night, he found himself looking for her channel again. This time she was doing a makeup tutorial. Thomas never cared about makeup, but he enjoyed listening to her talk. Her voice made his empty apartment feel less lonely. By the third night, Thomas created an account. He chose the name Bluesky42 and started typing in the chat. Simple things at first. "Hello from Chicago, and the lighting looks good tonight." To his surprise, Lisa noticed. "Bluesky42 from Chicago, welcome to the stream. First time chatting?" She smiled directly at the camera, and Thomas felt a rush of excitement. Someone had noticed him. Someone as pretty and kind as Lisa had said his name. He typed quickly, "Yes, first time chatting but third time watching." "Well, I'm glad you decided to say hello. How's the weather in Chicago?" she asked. The conversation was brief, just a few exchanges, but Thomas couldn't stop smiling. For the first time since his wife left, someone wanted to talk to him. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas never missed a stream. He learned that Lisa was 27, lived somewhere on the East Coast, and had been streaming for 2 years. She never shared too many personal details, which Thomas respected. One night, Lisa mentioned having trouble paying for a new camera. "The quality would be so much better, guys, but it's a bit out of my budget right now," she said with a small sigh. Without hesitation, Thomas opened the donation page. He had never sent money to an online streamer before. He stared at the amount field, then typed $50. It was more than he planned to spend, but the thought of helping Lisa made it worth it. When his username appeared on the screen with the donation, Lisa's face lit up. "Bluesky42. Thank you so much for the 50. That's so generous." She blew a kiss to the camera. "You're helping make this stream better for everyone." That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment Lisa said his username, the way she smiled, the kiss she blew. It wasn't meant just for him, he knew that. But it felt special anyway. The next day at work, Thomas checked his bank account. His salary had come in. After paying rent and bills, he would have enough left over. Enough to help Lisa get that camera. Enough to make her notice him again. That evening when he logged on and saw her streaming, he didn't hesitate. He donated $200. When Lisa saw the notification, she gasped. "Bluesky42, are you serious? $200? Oh my God, thank you." This time she put her hand over her heart. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Thomas felt something warm spread through his chest. Lisa was talking directly to him. Among hundreds of viewers, she was looking at him. For that moment in his mind, they were the only 2 people who existed. Weeks passed, and Thomas's donations became regular. $50 on Mondays, $100 on Fridays, sometimes more when Lisa mentioned needing something. His bank account shrank, but his connection to Lisa grew stronger. At least, that's what he told himself. Thomas started changing his work schedule to match Lisa's streaming times. He told his boss he needed different hours for personal reasons. His boss didn't ask questions. Thomas was a good worker, quiet and focused. No one at the office noticed how tired he looked or how often he checked his phone for Lisa's notifications. One night, Lisa announced a special stream for her top supporters. "Only my top 10 monthly donors will get the link," she said with a wink. Thomas felt his heart race. He was already number 3 on her donor list. He made sure to stay there. The special stream was nothing like Thomas expected. Lisa just talked more personally, shared stories about her childhood, and played her favorite songs. Nothing that would seem special to most people. But to Thomas, it felt like a private date. When she thanked Bluesky42 personally, he recorded the moment on his phone to watch again later. Thomas started a folder on his computer labeled Lisa. Inside were screenshots from her streams, moments when she smiled or said his username. He organized them by date, adding notes about what they talked about. Some nights, he'd spend hours looking through these pictures, imagining conversations with her. His apartment began to change too. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. Takeout containers covered the coffee table. The only clean spot was his desk where he watched Lisa every night. He bought a better chair for longer viewing, a larger monitor to see her more clearly. His ex-wife would have been disgusted, but she wasn't there to see what his life had become. One Thursday, Thomas called in sick to work. Lisa had mentioned doing an afternoon stream, and he couldn't miss it. During the stream, another viewer named Rocketman donated $500. Lisa screamed with excitement, jumping up and down, thanking Rocketman over and over. Thomas felt sick. The way she looked at the camera, the special smile she gave, that was supposed to be for him. He'd immediately donated $600. When Lisa saw it, she gasped, "Bluesky42, oh my goodness. You're incredible." But somehow it didn't feel the same as before. She'd given that reaction to someone else first. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He opened social media and searched for Lisa Miller, the name she used on her streaming profile. Most streamers used fake names, but maybe she didn't. After an hour of searching, he found her. The same smile, the same eyes. Her profile was partly public. Lisa Miller from Boston, not the East Coast in general, but Boston specifically. Her profile showed pictures of her with friends at restaurants Thomas could identify with a quick search, places he could visit, places where he might accidentally run into her. He also saw pictures of a man named Mark. Mark with his arm around Lisa. Mark kissing Lisa's cheek. Mark and Lisa on vacation. Each photo felt like a personal attack. Who was this Mark? Why didn't Lisa ever mention him? Thomas created a fake profile under the name Tom Blue. He sent Lisa a friend request, holding his breath as he clicked the button. Then he waited. Hours passed as he refreshed the page again and again. The next morning she accepted. Just like that, Thomas had access to more of Lisa's life. Where she went, who her friends were, what she did when she wasn't streaming. It felt like a victory, a step closer to her. A step closer to making what they had real. Thomas called work again. He wouldn't be coming in today either. He had more important things to do. He needed to learn everything about Lisa. And about Mark. Thomas spent hours each day scrolling through Lisa's social media. Her profile became a map of her life. He learned that she worked part-time at a coffee shop called Morning Brew. She went to yoga on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She liked sushi, particularly from a place called Ocean Blue near her apartment. Mark's profile was public too. He worked as a photographer. Many of Lisa's best photos were taken by him. Thomas hated how good they were. Mark captured Lisa's smile perfectly, the light in her eyes that Thomas felt was meant only for him. During Lisa's streams now, Thomas listened carefully for clues about her day. When she mentioned having a good lunch, he checked her social media later to see where she had been. When she talked about weekend plans, he made mental notes of places to avoid or visit. His boss called one morning. "Thomas, you've missed 5 days this month. Is everything okay?" Thomas assured him it was just a passing illness. He promised to be back on Monday, but Monday was Lisa's longest streaming day. He couldn't miss it. That night, during the stream, Thomas typed in the chat, "You look beautiful today. Your blue top matches your eyes." Lisa read it and smiled. "Thank you, Bluesky. You always notice the little things." But then another comment appeared from someone called Biemerguy24. "Isn't that the top Mark got you for your birthday?" Thomas froze. How did this person know about Mark? About Lisa's birthday? Lisa laughed. "Yes, good memory. Mark got it for me last month." The chat filled with questions about Mark. Lisa hesitated, then said, "Yes. Mark is my boyfriend. We've been together for 2 years now. He's actually in the other room editing photos." Thomas felt the room spin. Other viewers sent congratulations, some joked about being heartbroken, but Thomas felt actual pain in his chest. His hands shook as he closed the laptop. 2 years. She had been with Mark the entire time Thomas had known her. Every donation, every special thank you, every smile at the camera, she had been Mark's all along. The next day, Thomas didn't open his laptop. He called work and quit his job. They seemed concerned but accepted it. He had savings, enough to last a while. Enough to figure out what to do about Lisa and Mark. 3 days later, Thomas created a new account on Lisa's streaming platform. He called it Truth Seeker 77. He watched her stream silently. When she mentioned going to a movie with Mark on Friday, Thomas made a decision. He bought a train ticket to Boston for Thursday morning. He booked a hotel 3 blocks from where he believed Lisa lived. Based on the backgrounds in her photos and locations she had tagged, he packed a small bag with clothes for the weekend, and he brought the hunting knife his father had given him years ago. Just for protection in a strange city, he told himself. The train ride felt long. Thomas checked Lisa's social media every few minutes. She had posted about being excited for her weekend off. No streaming until Monday, the perfect time for Thomas to talk to her in person, to explain his feelings, to show her how Mark was wrong for her. Boston was colder than he expected. His hotel room was small but clean. From the window, he could see the street where he thought Lisa's apartment building stood. A brick building with green doors. He had seen her take a selfie in front of those doors once. That night, Thomas walked past the building twice. The second time he saw them. Lisa and Mark, returning home with takeout bags. She was laughing at something Mark said. Her laugh was the same as on her streams. But this laugh wasn't for Thomas. He followed at a distance, confirming which apartment was theirs by the light that turned on after they entered. 3rd floor, corner unit. Thomas stood in the shadows across the street for hours, watching their windows, seeing their shadows move behind the curtains. Tomorrow he would find a way to speak with Lisa alone. He would make her understand that what they had was special, more special than anything she had with Mark. He just needed the right moment, the right words, and maybe, just maybe, the knife in his bag would never need to come out at all. Morning came too slowly for Thomas. He had barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of Lisa. He checked her social media again. A new post showed her at Morning Brew, the coffee shop where she worked. The caption read, "Early shift today, then free for the weekend." Thomas knew this was his chance. He walked to the coffee shop, his heart pounding with each step. Through the window, he saw her. Lisa looked different in person, smaller somehow, but still beautiful. Her brown hair was tied back, and she wore a green apron as she made drinks behind the counter. Thomas ordered a coffee he didn't want. When Lisa turned to serve him, he couldn't speak at first. She smiled politely, not recognizing him. "Regular or large?" she asked. "Regular," Thomas managed to say. "I'm a big fan of your streams." Lisa's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, thank you." She looked uncomfortable but remained professional. "That'll be $3.75. As she handed him the coffee, Thomas blurted out, "I'm Bluesky 42. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed by confusion. "Oh, wow, nice to meet you in person." She glanced around nervously. "How did you know I worked here?" Thomas realized his mistake. "You mentioned it once," he lied. "I live nearby." Another lie. A coworker called Lisa to help with another order. "I have to get back to work," she said. "Thanks for stopping by." Thomas sat at a corner table for the next 2 hours, watching Lisa work. She kept looking at him, then quickly away. Once she took out her phone and typed something. Minutes later, she whispered to her manager, who looked over at Thomas with concern. When Lisa's shift ended, Thomas followed her outside. "Can we talk?" he asked, stepping in front of her. "I came all the way from Chicago to see you." Lisa's eyes widened. "From Chicago? Look, I appreciate your support online, but this isn't appropriate. How did you even find me?" "We have a connection," Thomas insisted. "I've donated thousands to your streams. We talk almost every day." "We don't talk," Lisa said firmly. "I stream and you watch. That's it. There is no personal relationship here." Thomas felt his face grow hot. "But the special streams, the way you thank me by name." "That's my job," Lisa interrupted. "I'm sorry if you misunderstood, but I think you should go home." She tried to step around him. Thomas grabbed her arm. Is it because of Mark? I know about him. He's not right for you. He doesn't appreciate you like I do. Fear crossed Lisa's face. How do you know about Mark? She pulled her arm away. You need to leave me alone or I'm calling the police. Please, Thomas begged, his voice breaking, just give me one chance to show you. No, Lisa said, backing away. This is stalking. Don't contact me again. She hurried down the street, looking back several times to make sure he wasn't following. Thomas stood frozen, watching her disappear around a corner. The rejection felt like a physical blow. After everything he had given her, his time, his money, his heart, this was how she treated him. Back in his hotel room, Thomas paced back and forth. His phone buzzed with a notification. Lisa had blocked both his regular account and his Truth Seeker 77 account on the streaming platform. She had also blocked Tom Blue on social media. He threw his phone against the wall. She was cutting him out completely. All because he had dared to approach her in person. All because of Mark. Night fell and Thomas sat in darkness, the hunting knife on the table in front of him. If Lisa wouldn't listen to reason, maybe there was another way to make her understand. He searched for Mark's photography business online. The website listed an upcoming outdoor photo session at Boston Public Garden tomorrow at 5 p.m. Mark would be busy with clients. Lisa would be alone in their apartment. Thomas picked up the knife, testing its weight in his hand. Tomorrow, he would have one more chance to make things right. One way or another, he would make Lisa see that they belonged together. And if she still refused to understand, well, Thomas wasn't sure what might happen next. Thomas woke up with a clear mind. The confusion and hurt from yesterday had hardened into something cold and certain. He checked the time, 3:15 p.m. In less than 2 hours, Mark would be at the Boston Public Garden for his photo session. Thomas had watched enough crime shows to know what to do. Leave no fingerprints, create no witnesses, have a story ready. He put on gloves, even though the day wasn't that cold. He slipped the hunting knife into his jacket pocket. At the hotel front desk, he paid in cash for one more night, making sure to smile at the receptionist so she would remember him as friendly. Thomas walked slowly toward Lisa's apartment building, taking a route through back streets to avoid security cameras. The sky was growing dark with rain clouds, perfect weather for what he needed to do. At 4:30, he saw Mark leave the building. He carried camera equipment and wore a professional-looking outfit. Thomas watched from across the street as Mark got into his car and drove away. Now Lisa was alone. Thomas crossed the street and entered the building behind an old woman who held the door open for him with a kind smile. He didn't belong there, but no one questioned him as he climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Outside Lisa's apartment, Thomas paused. He could hear music playing inside. His hand touched the knife in his pocket as he knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Who is it? Lisa called from inside. Package delivery, Thomas replied, disguising his voice. The music inside got quieter. He heard footsteps approaching the door. A moment of silence as she looked through the peephole. Go away, Thomas. I've called the police, Lisa said, her voice shaking. Thomas felt a rush of anger. I just want to talk. Please, Lisa, 5 minutes. The police are on their way. My neighbor is watching. Leave now. Thomas looked around. The hallway was empty. There's no one here, Lisa. Stop lying to me like you've been lying all along. I never lied to you, Lisa said. You created a fantasy in your head. We don't have a relationship. I don't even know you. Thomas slammed his fist against the door. I know everything about you. Your favorite food is sushi from Ocean Blue. You go to yoga on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Your birthday was last month and Mark got you that blue top. I've given you thousands of dollars. Silence from inside the apartment, then the sound of a phone being dialed. Thomas stepped back and kicked the door hard near the lock. It didn't open. He kicked again, putting all his weight behind it. The wood splintered and the door swung open. Lisa stood in the living room, phone to her ear, eyes wide with terror. He's breaking in, she screamed into the phone. Thomas rushed toward her. Lisa dropped the phone and ran for the kitchen. He caught her by the hair, pulling her backward. She screamed and clawed at his face, her nails drawing blood from his cheek. Stop fighting, Thomas shouted. I just want you to listen. Lisa grabbed a vase from a side table and smashed it against his head. Pain exploded across Thomas's temple. He let go of her hair and stumbled back. Lisa ran for the door, but Thomas recovered quickly. He lunged forward, tackling her to the ground. "Get off me!" Lisa screamed, twisting and kicking. Thomas pinned her down, his weight holding her in place. "Why couldn't you just talk to me? Why did you have to make this so difficult?" "Please," Lisa begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't hurt me." The knife felt heavy in Thomas's pocket. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to understand. She was supposed to see that he was better for her than Mark. "I love you," Thomas whispered. "Don't you see that? Everything I've done was for you." Lisa's eyes were filled with terror, not love, not understanding. Thomas realized then that she would never look at him the way she looked at Mark in those photos. She would never love him. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The sirens grew louder, but they still seemed far away. Thomas looked down at Lisa, still pinned beneath him. Her makeup was smeared by tears. The perfect face he had watched for months on his computer screen now twisted in fear because of him. "They won't understand," he said quietly. "The police, Mark, no one will understand what we have." "We don't have anything," Lisa cried. "Please, Thomas, let me go, and I won't press charges. You can just leave." Thomas laughed, a hollow sound. "Leave? Go where?" "Back to my empty apartment. Back to my life without you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the knife. Lisa's eyes fixed on the blade, and she began to struggle harder. "Help," she screamed. "Somebody help me." Thomas pressed his hand over her mouth. "Stop it. Just stop." His other hand held the knife, hovering in the air between them. "I didn't want it to be like this. This isn't how I imagined our first real meeting." Lisa's screams were muffled against his palm. Thomas felt her tears wet his hand. The sirens were getting closer. Soon the police would be here. In a sudden movement, Lisa bit down hard on the flesh of his hand. Thomas yelled in pain and pulled back. Lisa took the opportunity to knee him in the stomach and push him off her. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward the broken door. Thomas recovered quickly, lunging forward and grabbing her ankle. Lisa fell hard, her chin hitting the wooden floor with a crack. She cried out in pain as blood began to drip from her mouth. "You're making me do this," Thomas said, crawling up beside her. "This is your fault." Lisa spit blood onto the floor. "You're sick," she whispered. "You need help." Something inside Thomas broke at those words. The last thread holding his fantasy together snapped. If she couldn't see his love by now, she never would. He raised the knife. "I gave you everything," he said. "My time, my money, my love." Lisa's eyes widened as she realized what was about to happen. "No, please." The knife came down. Lisa tried to block it with her arm, and the blade sliced deep across her forearm. She screamed in pain. Thomas raised the knife again, his vision blurring with tears or rage or both. The second strike hit her shoulder. The third her chest. After that, Thomas lost count. Everything became a blur of motion and screams that gradually went quiet. There was blood everywhere, on his hands, his clothes, the floor. When he finally stopped, Thomas stared down at Lisa's still form. Her eyes were open but saw nothing. The living room was silent except for his heavy breathing and the steady drip of blood from the knife onto the floor. The sirens were very close now. Thomas knew he should run, but he couldn't move. He dropped the knife and sat back against the wall, his bloody hands resting on his knees. A phone rang, not Lisa's, which lay broken on the floor, but Thomas's own phone in his pocket. With mechanical movements, he pulled it out and looked at the screen. "Unknown number," he answered. "Thomas? This is Detective Wilson with the Boston Police. We've received a call about a disturbance at your location." Thomas blinked. "How did you get my number?" "The coffee shop manager called it in yesterday when Lisa reported your behavior. We've been tracking your phone since then. Officers are outside the building now. Is Lisa Miller with you?" Thomas looked at Lisa's body on the floor. "Yes," he said quietly. "She's here." "Is she safe, Thomas?" Thomas didn't answer. He ended the call and dropped the phone. From outside came the sound of car doors slamming, footsteps running, voices shouting commands. Thomas looked around the apartment. Photos of Lisa and Mark smiled down from the walls. Her streaming setup sat in the corner, the camera, the ring light, the colorful backdrop where she had smiled at him so many times. None of it had been real. The apartment door, already damaged from his entry, burst open completely as police officers rushed in, guns drawn. 6 months passed. The courtroom was packed for the final day of the trial. Thomas Amato sat at the defense table in a gray suit that hung loose on his thinning frame. His eyes were dull, his posture slumped. The man who had once been so consumed with passion now looked empty. Detective James Wilson sat in the front row. The Amato case had consumed his life for half a year. The evidence was overwhelming. Thomas's online donations to Lisa, his fake social media account, the knife with his fingerprints, the hotel booking near her apartment, and the GPS data showing him traveling from Chicago to Boston. Most damning of all were the thousands of screenshots found on Thomas's computer. Lisa's face captured from streams, organized by date, with notes about what she said or wore. Mark sat across the aisle, his face gaunt with grief. He hadn't returned to their apartment since that day. Couldn't bear to see the place where Lisa had died. His photography business was on hold. Everything was on hold. The prosecution's psychiatrist had testified that Thomas suffered from erotomania, a delusional disorder where he truly believed Lisa shared his romantic feelings. The defense argued for diminished capacity, claiming Thomas couldn't distinguish between Lisa's professional persona and reality. The prosecution countered with evidence of premeditation: the knife, the gloves, the timing of his arrival when Mark would be away. The jury had deliberated for just 4 hours. Now they filed back into the courtroom, none making eye contact with Thomas or Mark. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom fell silent as the paper was handed to the judge, then returned to the foreman. "On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Thomas Amato, guilty." Mark closed his eyes, his shoulders shaking silently. Thomas showed no reaction, as if he'd known this moment was inevitable from the day he first clicked on Lisa's stream. The judge thanked the jury and set the sentencing date for the following month. As the bailiff approached to take Thomas away, he finally spoke. "Can I say something?" he asked, his voice hoarse from weeks of silence. The judge hesitated, then nodded, briefly. Thomas turned to face Mark. "I loved her too," he said simply. "In my mind we had something real." Mark stared back, his face twisted with anger and pain. "You never knew her," he said. "The real Lisa. You killed a fantasy that never existed." Thomas was led away in handcuffs, his eyes still fixed on Mark until the courtroom door closed behind him. Outside, reporters swarmed Detective Wilson. The Amato case had sparked national debates about online boundaries, parasocial relationships, and the safety of content creators. 3 states had already introduced Lisa's Law to increase penalties for stalking in the digital age. "Detective, what can other streamers learn from this tragedy?" a reporter asked. Wilson thought about the evidence he'd spent months reviewing: the donations, the private messages, the gradual escalation that everyone had missed until it was too late. "The line between fan and predator can be invisible until it's crossed," he said. "Platforms need better protections, and viewers need to remember that the person on their screen is not actually speaking to them personally." 1 month later, Thomas received a life sentence with possibility of parole after 25 years. He declined to make a statement at his sentencing. His lawyer told reporters he had finally begun to understand the reality of what he had done. Mark eventually returned to photography, specializing in portraits of families. He created the Lisa Miller Foundation to help educate content creators about security measures and warning signs of stalking behavior. Lisa's streaming equipment was donated to a women's shelter where it was used to teach digital media skills. Her parents kept her accounts active as memorials, with links to donate to anti-stalking organizations. Thomas's computer, with its thousands of screenshots, remained in an evidence locker. Sometimes newer detectives would study the case, trying to identify the moment when admiration had turned into deadly obsession. But that line remained as blurry as the boundary between the digital world and reality, a boundary that for Thomas Amato had disappeared completely.